All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, the start to the 2022 college football season is right around the corner. And with that said, I want to talk today about the upcoming season in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Now, of course, the ACC is a Power Five conference. They are trying to maintain their seat at the table. We've seen a lot of reshuffling recently in college football with the big powers in the Big Ten and the SEC getting stronger. But the ACC they are showing they want to show that they are here to stay, and also they want to show that they can also be a player on the college football playoff scene. Now, with that said, who has the best chance to win this conference and, of course, possibly get to the playoff? Now, I want to start off in the Atlantic Division of the ACC. And you look at Louisville and you ask yourself, is this the year that Louisville and Scott Satterfield break through to become a force in the ACC? They have a lot of tools in place to do it. You look at senior quarterback Malik Cunningham, who is a stud, and he could really throw that football. You also look at running back Trevion Cooley. And on the defensive side, outside linebacker Yashir Abdullah is definitely a playmaker. Now, for the Cards, they have an interesting schedule. They get things kicked off on the road at Syracuse. Then, less than a week later, they're at UCF out of the American Conference. They're home for Florida State on the 16th of September. And then moving to the month of October, they host Pitt, who won the ACC last year on the 22nd. They host Wake Forest on the 29th. And Wake Forest was also a participant in the ACC championship game at Clemson on the 12th of November. And then NC State, they host them on the 19th of November. And speaking of Clemson, we saw the Tigers get knocked off of their throne last year. They did not win the ACC, but they're looking to bounce back and win this conference for the seventh time in the last 8 years. And for Clemson head football coach Dabo Swinney, he's done it all there. And only Frank Howard has won more games at Clemson than him. Now, this is a transition year for the Tigers. Brent Venables is no longer the defensive coordinator as he's not a head football coach at Oklahoma. And you think about the job defensively that Venables has done in recent years. And of course, he was a part of Clemson winning those national championships. So now it's going to be Mickey Kahn and Wes Godwin, or Goodwin, excuse me, who are going to be the co-defensive coordinators this year for Clemson. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works out, especially being that Clemson had the eighth ranked defense in the nation a year ago. Junior outside linebacker Trenton Simpson is definitely a player to keep an eye on in this Tigers defense, as is defensive end Miles Murphy. But Clemson can be stingy all that they want on the defensive side of the football. They have to find a way to score points. And last year, it was a struggle for this Clemson passing game as they were 103rd in the nation. So it's one of those DJU, he took his lumps last year and he has to find a way to improve. And if he can improve, definitely that's going to mean better footing for this Clemson offense. Also, keep an eye out for running back Will Shipley. He'll definitely have an impact in this offense. But at the end of the day, as DJU goes, so will the fortunes of this Clemson offense. Now, the Tigers begin the month of September in Atlanta as they take on Georgia Tech. They're at Wake Forest on the 24th of September. That's a big game for both teams. At Florida State on the 15th of October. And then they're at Notre Dame on the 5th of November. But that, of course, is not a conference game. Now, speaking of Wake Forest, for them, they had a good run last year. They got to the ACC championship game, and the expectations were high. But everything with Sam Hartman, excuse me, with his medical issue, it's something that's really going to really take this program back for this year. And Sam Hartman, when he's on, he is one of the best playmakers in the ACC, and not having him really changes the outlook for Dave Clawson and his club. You still have wide receiver A.T. Perry, and defensively, you have linebacker Ryan Smith Jr. as well as defensive end Rondell Bothroyd. But the bottom line is Sam Hartman not being there is going to change a lot of things for the Demon Deacons. Now, you look at Syracuse, and for Syracuse and Dino Babers, they have to try to find a way to avoid another subpar season. And I say that because Babers has only had one winning season in his 5 years at Syracuse. Running back Sean Tucker will definitely have to have an impact on his team. And defensively, you look at linebacker Mikel Jones as well as linebackers Marlowe Wax and Stephon Thompson. They got to find a way to shut it down and set the tone for this Cuse team. And for Syracuse, they have a very tough schedule ahead of them for this season. They host Louisville on the 3rd of September. They host Purdue out of the Big Ten on the 17th of September. They host NC State on the 15th of October. They're at Clemson on the 22nd of October. They host Notre Dame on the 29th of October, at Pitt on the 5th of November, and then they host Florida State on the 12th of November, and then they're at Wake Forest on the 19th of November. So it's not a lot of weak spots in this Syracuse schedule. They're looking to make some noise in the ACC. Speaking of making noise in the ACC, NC State has been close in recent years to getting to the title game, but will this be the year that Dave Doran and his club finally break through? Junior quarterback Devin Leary is solid, and then you look at outside linebacker Drake Thomas on this Wolfpack defense. He is a tone setter. Now, NC State's first conference game will be on the 1st of October when they travel to Clemson. Big game because if you remember back to last year, NC State got the best of Clemson at home. Obviously, the surrounding or the stadium rather where this game would take place this year definitely changes. Right after that, the Wolfpack will host Florida State on the 8th. They then host Wake Forest on the 5th of November. They're at Louisville on the 19th of November. And then, of course, they're at North Carolina on the 25th of November. For Boston College, it's going to be another tough uphill battle for them in the ACC. You know, outside of those first couple of years when BC joined the ACC, when they still had Matt Ryan at quarterback, this is a program that has really gotten caught up in the wash. And, you know, they have never found their footing in the ACC. And for the most part, excuse me, they just continue to be a fish out of water. Now, you look at Florida State, and once upon a time, obviously, it was the Seminoles and everybody else in the ACC. Well, obviously, those things have changed as the Noles are coming off of consecutive losing seasons. And with that said, the pressure is going to be on their head coach, Mike Norvell, to turn things around. Junior quarterback Jordan Travis, can he light a spark for this Florida State offense, as well as junior free safety Jamie Robinson on the defensive side? And, you know, for the Seminoles, they started off slow last year, but, you know, they picked it up in the second half of the season, and they want to try to carry some of that momentum over to this year. And definitely they know that a stronger start will be in their favor. Now, they'll travel to the Superdome in New Orleans on the 4th of September to clash with LSU. Then they're at Louisville on the 16th of September. That could be a big game for both of these teams. They host Wake Forest on the 1st of October. They're at NC State on the 8th of October, and then they're home for Clemson on the 15th of October. So that is a tough 3-game stretch right there. At Miami on the 5th of November, and then, of course, they finish at home with the Gators out of the SEC. Now, moving ahead to the Coastal Division, for the Miami Hurricanes, it's a homecoming as former offensive lineman Mario Cristobal, who had a successful 4-year run as the head ball coach up at Oregon, is now coming back to take over his alma mater's program. And with that said, there is a buzz in South Florida for this Canes program for the first time in a long time. But can Cristobal make the Canes a contender for the ACC title right now? You look at sophomore quarterback Tyler Van Dyke. He did throw 25 touchdowns last year as a freshman, so he definitely wants to, build off of that. But Cristobal has inherited a very young Miami team, and they got to try to get their footing in this ACC. Out of conference, Miami has a tough one as they will travel to College Station on the 17th of September to take on the Texas A&M Aggies out of the SEC. They're home for North Carolina on the 8th of October, and that's always been a tough game for Miami. Of course, the big one with Florida State, it's not the rivalry that it was once upon a time on the national scene, but don't tell the football folks in Miami and Tallahassee that when these two clubs clash on the 5th of November. Miami will be at Clemson on the 19th of November, and then they're home for Pitt on the 26th of November. For the Duke Blue Devils, of course, David Cutcliffe is no longer the head coach after a long tenure there. It's the Mike Elko show, and he's got to try to find a way to get this Duke program on track, which is easier said than done. Now, you look at Virginia, and following the retirement of Bronco Mendenhall, it's Tony Elliott's time to run this Virginia program. Now, first and foremost, you have to fix the D, as the Cavaliers were 121st in the nation last year in total defense. You look at middle linebacker Nick Jackson, who's a senior. He has to be a guy that steps up for this unit. On the flip side, for the offense, you do have some talent there with the likes of quarterback Brennan Armstrong and wide receiver Dontavion Wicks. But honestly, I think Elliott is really going to spend a good portion of this season trying to get his footing in the ACC. Now, for North Carolina, they failed to live up to expectations last year, but how will things work out for Mac Brown and his Tar Heels here in 2022? The Tar Heels definitely have to improve on defense as they were 95th in the nation a year ago. You look at linebacker Cedric Gray. What type of impact will he have for this team? And you also have senior strong safety Cam Kelly, who could definitely have an impact as well. Now, of course, no more Sam Howell at quarterback for Carolina as he's in the NFL, but you have junior quarterback Jacoby Criswell, who will look to make the most of his time as starter for in Chapel Hill. And when Criswell is throwing the football, I expect junior wide receiver Josh Downs to be on the receiving end of a good chunk of those passes. Now, for North Carolina, they will host Notre Dame on the 24th of September. They're at Miami on the 8th of October, which could be a big one. They host Pitt, the defending ACC champs, on the 29th of October. Then they're at Wake Forest on the 12th of November, and then they host NC State on the 25th of November. And speaking of Pitt, like I just said, 2021 was a banner year for this Pitt Panthers football program as they won their first outright conference title of any kind in program history. They won some Big East conference titles, but they had to share those and they ended up being co-champions. But for the Panthers, they got to try to find a way to build off of that and do something, a little bit better for the encore, if you will, if that's possible. But with that said, Pat Narduzzi, their head football coach, he has really established himself at Pitt after coming over after being the defensive coordinator at Michigan State. And this Pitt program is a tough-minded team in the mold of their head coach. Now, replacing Kenny Pickett at quarterback, and of course, we saw what Pickett did last year in this offense. Now, Pitt lost a big time marquee player to USC. So what do? You get yourself a big name player from the West Coast to come east. And that's exactly what the Panthers did, as former USC quarterback Kedon Slovis will now be under center for the Panthers. Now you still have wide receiver Jared Wayne to throw the football to, and you also have the pleasure of being protected by an experienced offensive line with 4 seniors and a grad transfer up front. Defensively, you want to look at middle linebacker Savakia Dennis, as he could have a big time impact for this unit. And the same can be said about senior defensive end Habakkuk Baldonado. Now, with that said, Pitt begins the season when they clash with a former Big East rival in West Virginia, and even going back to their days as independents. The backyard brawl was always a hot ticket in that region. Pitt will host Tennessee on the 10th of September. And remember, Pitt went to Knoxville last year and got the best of the Vols. Pitt will be home for Louisville on the 22nd of October. They're at North Carolina on the 29th of October, and then they're at Miami on the 26th of November. And you look at those back-to-back games with Louisville and North Carolina. They could go a long way in determining who gets to the ACC championship game. For Virginia Tech and head coach Brent, he is tasked with getting this Hokies program back on track. It's going to be a work in progress this year for the Hokies. One player to keep an eye on will definitely be middle linebacker Dax Hollifield. For Virginia Tech, their first conference game comes on the 1st of October when they travel to Chapel Hill to take on North Carolina. They're home for Miami on the 15th of October. And then, of course, the Commonwealth State battle when they clashed with Virginia on the 26th of November. And finally, with Georgia Tech, Jeff Collins, it's been a tough go for him so far in Atlanta with the Yellow Jackets. Defensively, Georgia Tech was 117th in the nation last season, and the Jackets simply have to find a way to get it going on both sides of the ball. But when it's all said and done, it's just going to be a struggle, in my opinion, for the Jackets to keep up in the ACC this season. So on the Atlantic side of the ACC, I think it's going to be a battle between Louisville, Clemson, and NC State to win that division and get to the conference championship game. On the flip side, with the Coastal, it's been a toss up for the longest time because you really, whenever you see the consistency, it comes out of the Atlantic. We saw Florida State dominate things for years, and then Clemson has taken that banner. And on the Coastal side, you really don't see teams repeat and get back to the conference championship game consistently. So theoretically, you want to say that would take Pitt out of the running, but I still think that Pitt is going to be in the mix to win the Coastal. I think North Carolina is going to be there as well, and I think even the young Canes and Mario Cristobal are going to be there as well. But when it's all said and done, I see an ACC championship game between Clemson and Miami. Of course, these two programs did meet there several years ago. And when it's all said and done, I think Clemson gets back on track and gets themselves another ACC championship. So it's one of those where I think there's going to be some very competitive football this year in the ACC. I think Louisville has a good team. The same thing could be said for NC State. Definitely want to keep an eye on North Carolina. But when it's all said and done, the Tigers will once again reclaim their throne as kings of the mountain in the Atlantic Coast Conference. So, folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.